Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Young Adults Cancer Canada first big cancer hookup event. Love the live audience. I'm Jerry Lewis, and I'm pleased to be your facilitator this evening. And my job is to help bring technology and bring Canada just a little bit closer together tonight. And we hope that you will participate. And we'll talk to you about how you'll be participating with us and across the various sites in a moment from now. Other than the live site here in Toronto, we have 6 remote locations. We have Surrey, Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, Ottawa, and Montreal. So bonsoir and bienvenue to our friends in Montreal.
Hey, all right.
And we also have a lot of people joining us from home on Facebook as well. So welcome to all of you. For the satellite locations, your site hosts have been briefed on how to submit your questions to us through Facebook. I would encourage all viewers to send in their questions so that we can really have a national discussion about the challenges and triumphs of young adults with cancer. And for our guests watching from home, simply post your questions on Facebook, on the Big Cancer Hookup Facebook group, which I'll be moderating from back here. And from time to time, whenever there's an opportunity, I will be interjecting into the live panel here with your questions and insights. Now, you know, as with technology, we don't anticipate any technology breakdown, but you never know. So in the event that there is a breakdown, the toll-free number to call in to listen to the event still is on the Facebook page. So please take a moment just to identify where that is. In a moment, I'll be introducing you to Jeff Eaton, who's the founder and executive director of Young Adult Cancer Canada and 2-time survivor of cancer, who will kick off this evening. And Jeff is a very big part of why tonight is happening. So big round of applause for Jeff as well. Our discussion this evening will be under 4 themes, or 4 key categories. Our first theme is dealing with uncertainty. The second theme is it takes longer to recover than to be treated. The third theme is reintroduction, or other words, getting back your life on track. And the final theme is the importance and impact of community. So those are the 4 key themes we'll be talking about this evening. After each of the themes, we'll have an opportunity for comments, insights, and questions. And also at the very end, after the 4 themes are completed, we'll have an open forum question period. If all your questions don't get addressed tonight, don't worry. Someone from the YAC team will be communicating with you to make sure they're all addressed. Or if you have a question tonight from one of the remote locations that you don't want to post on Facebook, you can simply send it to YAC at connect@youngadultcancer.ca, and we'll address it from there as well. Your participation tonight is truly going to make this a really successful event, and I ask the live audiences as well to participate as much as possible with the cue cards, and certainly from our remote locations via Facebook. Let's say, let's talk Canada. And at the end of tonight, we'll be talking a bit about the survey, which will be sent out to you in the next couple of days. I believe there are great prizes for those of you who complete the survey. And also, the most important thing is it helps us improve these events for future as well. Okay? So let's get things started, as they say. So please help me welcome our host for tonight, Jeff Eaton. Take it away, Jeff.
Thanks very much, Jerry. And I'll say a few quick thank yous off the top. The gang at Scotiabank, Francis, Anastasia, Katie, Enactus, Heather, and Curtis, and a whole big team. And our team at YAC, Leslie and Karine in particular, Angie, Beth, and a whole group of us. Big, massive team effort, and great to have some key partners help us out with this. Really appreciate that, and especially to you as well, Jerry. So really welcome everybody here tonight, physically and virtually across the country. We're really glad to have you join us for the first Big Cancer Hookup. We want you to know that you're connecting with people literally all across the country. And that means even if you're home on the couch right now, tuned into the webcast, we want you to know that you're not alone. In fact, you're connected now to YAC's network. There are hundreds of young adults, patients, and survivors, literally from British Columbia to Newfoundland and Labrador, tuned in just tonight. And you are now part of YAC's network, which are hundreds and hundreds more all across this country. And they're full of people who are connected and really have gone through or are still going through what you're going through. So you should know that your isolation is no more. To the survivors in particular tonight, especially the new ones, we really want you to know that you've found a home in YAC. It's a home of survivors who are connected, a little crazy sometimes. They are unconditionally loving. They are fun and funny. And they have gone through what you're going through. And they have your back, no matter what. From the early days of diagnosis to the 2 a.m. panic attack to the devastation of a relapse or the elation of a remission, we've got your back. To the partners that have joined us here tonight, we know you know, we want to say again, cancer is not more difficult for young adults. It's a big-time challenge whenever it comes. But it's different for young adults. And that's really driven by the stage of life that we're in. It's a different experience. Whether we're dealing with friends, early career, relationships, fertility. These things make it a different experience for young adults. And it can make the challenge of dealing with cancer as a young adult seem insurmountable. But amidst this seemingly insurmountable challenge, we know that connecting with another young adult can literally be life-changing. Some would even say life-saving. And we can't give this help without your help. So a huge thank you to you for you guys being here. I want to be moved now to more formally introduce the panel. And we'll dive into our discussion. It's more like a chat. For the moment, probably the next hour, we're going to pretend you guys aren't even here, if that's okay. We're just going to have a chat. So I want to begin and just introduce to my far right, Jamie Carswell. Jamie was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2008 at the age of 23. She's had a local recurrence in May of this year. She's a mom to super cool Lincoln, master of high fives. Has a very supporting, loving husband, JP, who's very connected to our network. Jamie came to us in a very unique way, in fact. And she had a nurse that we're really grateful for, who saw her in clinic on a regular basis and asked her repeatedly, "Have you checked out that retreat yet? Have you checked out that retreat yet?" She was so persistent, Jamie finally said, "Will you shut up if I go to that retreat?"
I never said that.
Her nurse said yes, and she came, and she's been super connected ever since. She's an alumni of Retreat Yourself, Survivor Conference, very connected to YAC, and we're so glad that she's come with little Lincoln and JP from Red Deer. Really glad to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Peter Linus was diagnosed with testicular cancer in 2002 at 26, had a recurrence in 2006, and is also a very, very connected member of YAC's community. He is an authentic actor, but also the leader of Local Life Toronto with his partner in crime, Bonnie. Peter's also an alumni of Retreat Yourself and Survivor Conference, and I'm really glad you could make the time to join us tonight. I really appreciate you being here.
Don't want to be anywhere else.
Yeah, glad to have you, man. And Lindsay Frangakis, diagnosed with brain cancer a couple of years ago, December of 11. And again, an alumni of Retreat and Survivor Conference last year was when we first got to meet Lindsay and her husband, Steve. And a couple of words come to mind when I think of Lindsay. The first one is spunk. And that's because her blog is actually called Lynn's the Firecracker. And the next is sweet. As Peter described on our call earlier this week, she's so sweet, she's like sugar on feet. So this is who's joining us tonight, and what we're going to do over the next hour, hour and a half, is we're just going to have a discussion. I'm totally kidding about ignoring you in the room, by the way. It's really a discussion across those four themes that Jerry mentioned, and there's a chance for you guys to jump in and ask questions as well. So before we dive into the first one, I thought it was important to start just to give a little more rounded picture. And I'll ask you to start, Jamie, is, the day before cancer. Who were you on that day? Give us a little bit of insight into what was happening in your life at that time and where were you going?
So that was in 2008, and I was a member of the RCMP. I had graduated December 10th of 2007, so I was about a 2-month member by the time I was diagnosed. So things were definitely different. I was living in northern BC by myself, me and my 3 cats. And I I was just getting ready to start my job. Like, I just was ready to get out there and I guess make a change in the world. That's what I always thought I would do. So that's where I was at. I just graduated. I was kind of raring to go, and then just had this annoying pain in my left breast, just this thing I thought would maybe go away, and never did. So I went to the doctor and got it checked out, and initially I had been told it was a torn muscle, and so a lot of people my age at 23 going through that will probably be misdiagnosed. It's something that happens with us at our age. So that happened with me, and I kind of ignored it for the rest of my RCMP training, and 6 months later I graduated and I was ready to go, and so this lump was still there, and I was having kind of like fainting spells every once in a while, and it's fairly dangerous when you have a gun on your side to be laid out on the ground. So I got it checked out, and not too long after I was diagnosed. So I went from basically starting my whole life over to start a new career to moving back home. I basically moved back in with my parents so they could help me out during chemo, and yeah, so that's where life changed. I went from being this independent person to being someone that had to be kind of taken care of. So big change for me. But yeah, I came back and I started treatment, so that was kind of a huge change for me.
Yeah. Change is a theme that comes with diagnosis, hey? How about the day before diagnosis for you, Peter? What was going on in your life? What were you doing?
I think I can speak for a lot of... Sorry, that's really close. I think I can speak for a lot of survivors, where, say, the moment that you hear the word, you just sort of, everything turns into a snapshot, and you remember everything. So I remember December 19th, 2002. So December 18th, I could comfortably say I was 5 weeks in, going once a week to Toronto General Hospital with a very uncomfortable, at that point, like a kiwi-sized testicle. And I was being told things like, oh, it's this type of virus, or it's inflammation of the lymph nodes. What type of sexual activity have you been doing? And I'm looking going, what? No, I don't get it. Being sent home with antibiotics and painkillers. And confused, scared, trying my hand back then, starting off with acting in life and figuring out my way. And then one night, after 4 weeks, on the 5th try, walking into Toronto Emerge, I was extremely lucky that the on-call resident doctor happened to be a urologist. Took one look, and he's like, upstairs, right now, CT scan, we got to check it out. 4 o'clock that morning. It's, yeah, you've got testicular cancer. We need to get it out of you right now. It's like, great. First thing out of my mouth was, can I have a painkiller? And I watched my roommate have this massive emotional breakdown. I was like, you've got cancer. And I realized I'm hugging him saying, it's okay, it's not you. You'll be fine. Where's that painkiller? Probably for him. And I think it was shock. Like, I didn't allow myself to, I make a joke sometimes. I say, assume crash position. And it's just, all right, what's happening? What do I do next? And I became very clear and calculated. I just needed, all right, what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? And so I think the day before just blurred into it. It didn't, I don't want to say it didn't seem like it mattered, but it was so not on the radar compared to that moment. And ironically, just last 2 weeks ago, walked into Toronto General for a friend who had a terrible foot injury. And as I was walking in, on the left-hand side, I mentioned quickly to my partner, I go, do you know what that room is? He goes, no, that's where I got diagnosed with cancer. I haven't seen that room in 10 years. And it was more like I walked by, I don't want to say a favorite tourist spot, but it's something that meant something to me. And just the room looked the same. It's like, huh. And then just kept going.
A lot of things that happened in those 10 years, hey?
Yeah.
We'll get to that in the next hour. Thanks. Lindsay, the day before, who are you? What was your life?
I had graduated from university about 4 or 5 months before I was diagnosed, and I had my mind made up. I was on a career path. I was not stopping. I was going to own a house in 2 years. I was going to have a baby 2 years after that. I only wore designer labels. I knew where I was headed, and nothing was going to stop me. And at work, for a couple months before I was diagnosed, I was having what turned out to be seizures. I didn't know they were seizures at the time, and my family doctor said, yeah, we should send you for an MRI. And it was a Saturday when I had my MRI. It was actually 2 years ago yesterday that I had my MRI. And I was just thinking, this is a pain in the butt. I have to miss an hour of work to go for this stupid test. I went for the test, and sure enough, they found something in my brain. And even, as they're telling me, there's this lump in your brain, we don't know what it is right now, I was like, okay, can I go back to work now? I have to go back to work. I have a wedding to run that's starting in half an hour. I have to be there. And it was a very slow process for me, understanding what that lump in the brain was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can relate to that specifically. I know, I think it's a rite of passage at some level for young adults to feel invincible.
Yes.
We're young, we're strong, we're robust, hopefully physically and emotionally. A lot of times we're just getting to be independent for the first time in our life, and really all of us were kind of at that stage, ironically. And then cancer comes, and it does kind of lead us right into our first theme of uncertainty, which is, you go from what you think is a very certain space of this pursuit of your dreams, your path, whatever your passion is at that time, to, having almost everything, if not everything, come into question. Can you talk about uncertainty in those early parts of your experience, the diagnosis and the months that followed, and how uncertainty ruled your life, or played a role?
I went from having everything in my mind was certain. I knew exactly, or I thought I knew exactly how my life was going to unfold, to having nothing left. I lost my license, which was the biggest challenge early on for me. I lost my job. I lost just everything. I didn't realize the ramifications of that until probably 6 months into my treatment, where I started to learn that there were some things I could count on. But it's rough. We all, I'm sure, still deal with uncertainty. You just have to take it a day at a time. Day at a time.
Well said.
Yeah.
I think it changes the moment you're diagnosed, and like a lot of things in that experience, it kind of there's an ebb and flow within it. I don't know. Maybe some people do get back to certainty in some significant way, but I think for most of us, it probably is something that is there no matter how long.
Live with it.
Peter, you're out 10 or 11 years. How has uncertainty evolved for you from the time, the early days through to 10 years out? Have you seen its change and how it's evolved?
The best way that I could describe it, and I've said this before, is that cancer gave me the best kick in the ass I didn't know I needed. And it went from being so incredibly focused on I had this mission. It's beat this thing. I don't care what it takes. I'll do it 2 times over. I'm just going to do it. And I was this guy, he was like 26, 27, where I decided to take up recreational gymnastics. I was on blood thinners. I terrified every single person in that room because they're like, there's a guy with no hair doing back handsprings who's on blood thinners. That's not smart. But that was my time. That was my hour. It was like where I was untouchable. And the uncertainty it came after the first time I was told you're clear. Because in that moment, nothing compares to that. As far as I understood, I was fighting for my life. And now what? Whoa, I don't know what to do. Nothing even comes close. Nothing has the same level of magnitude. And frankly speaking, I felt lost for the longest time, 2-3 years. I just kind of meandered from here to there, 2 years, and then I got diagnosed a second time with testicular cancer in the other one. And that just, okay, is this some type of cosmic do-over? Like, did I not handle it right the first time? I'm not sure. But the only thing that you can truly control is how you react. And I had an opportunity to deal with it differently, and it's been a process where you can either own it or you don't.
Yeah.
And
let's hold that for a second, because I want to come back to exactly that. How do we deal? And the control piece is a really important one. Jamie, we were talking earlier today about the first time cancer comes, and then a subset of us are going to have it come back again. How did uncertainty change for you from the first to the second?
It's funny, actually. I thought going into treatment, I thought I had it all figured out. It was just kind of like a little glitch in the path, but I was still going to get back to exactly where I was and start over again. And, well, that didn't happen. So basically it's funny that we've all said the same thing, that we had a plan and like nothing was going to stop us from getting to that plan. And so I kind of looked at it the first time as kind of just like a little derailment, but I'll get there, like it's going to suck to go through this, but whatever. I'm still going to get to my dream. That's what I had planned out, so it's going to happen. So it's funny because since the time of diagnosis, it was probably 5 years of treatment. Like I didn't stop treatment for 5 years, and I still really actually thought that was going to happen again. I would get back to right where I was going. And then I was diagnosed again. And that was like a kick in the ass. Like, it didn't hit me until a second time, basically, that, holy smokes, this is not as easy as I thought it would be. And even going through it all, I mean, it was not a fun time. But the second time, it's been harder for me. There's a few different factors that make it that way. I have a baby now and a husband, and so yeah, that makes it a lot harder to look at him and be uncertain of what his life holds. Am I there or am I not, kind of thing, right? So uncertainty it's a tough one for me because, like I say, the first time I just went through it knowing there was an end game. Like I would be healthy one day and I'd get back to work and we'd still have everything planned out. But this second time, it may be a question in my mind, like, will I ever get back? Will I ever be okay? And will I be around to raise him? That's the biggest thing. So no one ever knows, but cancer makes it a lot harder to understand where your path is, I guess, kind of thing.
Yeah, it brings the mortality front and center for us, and at a time in our life when we certainly didn't expect to have to deal with that issue. And a YAC alumni and a buddy of ours, Steve Webster, says when you're just starting your life, a diagnosis of cancer forces you to face the end of your life, and that affects the rest of your life. I quote Steve all the time on that phrase because it's very true. And that's got a lot of benefits sometimes, perspective and other things, but massive challenge. And you touched on it, and I think all of you have said it, but I think part of the challenge with uncertainty is it's a loss of control. We were under the impression that we had control over our lives, and then this massive obstacle comes in our way, and it really challenges that for us. And Peter, you said, I don't know if it's your philosophy but the idea that, if we can, the more we focus on what we can control, the better we are. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I find ironically, it was a book that I kept turning back to when I was going through chemo treatment. It was just a collection of 13th century Japanese prose, and I only picked it up because I thought the cover looked cool. And there was that one adage of the extent of your control ends at your skin. And the idea of it is that it's your ability to react. And, in the midst of the uncertainty and what it is that you can do and what you can't do, well, if I understand and I recognize that my control ends at my skin, what happens outside of me? What can I do? I can react. I can choose to accept it, I can change it, or I can exit. And I'm not going to do anything foolish to myself, so I'm not going to exit. And if I can change it, I will, but if I have to accept it, then I will. And if those are my options, then that's what I have to work with. For one of the treatments that I had to do for my surgery on my abdomen, from the picture you saw up there where it's, I got gutted, for lack of a better term, I always touch on one phrase from that book where it says, a warrior goes out into the field and he's felled by a sword. He comes back with a scar and it's a badge of honor. How is any treatment that any of us do any different? And that's just, it keeps going in my head over and over again every time I meet a new survivor. And it's just, for me, that's become my certainty. I see everyone's ability to react and they choose to take it head on, and I find it the most admirable and honorable choice. It can be something really huge over the top, or it can be something as simple as sitting down next to a stranger in treatment. And I think that's where my own personal philosophy has grown, is in my choice to react, is to choose to react and to be active in the moment. And each moment, we all know there's never a guarantee of the next one. So how are you going to make the most of this?
Yeah. Lindsay, how did you deal with the uncertainty? How do you still deal with the uncertainty? It's not over. It's not like you put that away and I got that one figured out. Yeah. It's a process.
I've learned to control what I can control. Control for me is extremely important. So I can control, exactly as what Peter was saying, how I react to things. I can control what I eat. I can control how much I exercise. I can control what I do, who I associate with, and that's it. It ends there. And learning that has given me some certainty back into my life. It's allowed me to make decisions, which when I was diagnosed, I felt that I didn't have the ability to make a decision about anything.
Right.
That's been extremely helpful for me.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I found that the first time I was diagnosed, I had, like Jamie, like confidence. I got this, and I did. Like I had a 2-year post-transplant goal, and I nailed it. And almost exactly that week, my blood starts to drop off until 3 months later I had a relapse. And the recurrence just definitely shook my confidence, my foundation of confidence in my health for sure. And I have found over time, when I am doing those things, when I'm eating well, I'm getting sleep, and I'm going to the gym, and I have this feeling that is stronger. This confidence is stronger. My ability to deal with the uncertainty is stronger than if I'm not doing those things. That may or may not put me in a better position to deal with the uncertainty, but I feel like I am. And that has been a real game changer for me, to identify those items that I can put on my list and kind of my assets in my toolbox, and have those things working for me. Because the uncertainty, I'm 15 years in from diagnosis last couple weeks ago, and the uncertainty pervades. It's around, so it hasn't gone away from me yet. I don't know, maybe it will someday, but it hasn't gone away yet. Jerry, we're gonna check in with our gang. How's everybody doing?
Well, we got fully engaged here, and we have a lot of comments that are coming in as well. That uncertainty for me is the frustration of what health issues will be next. How close will my body how else will my body betray me? Are some of the comments that are coming in. I've needed a kidney surgery and ortho surgery as a side effect of cancer. And another comment, totally agree with control. It's a tough one to give up. And do you think getting a diagnosis forces you to give up control, or just alter your emotions? The notion of control, like what is control? What are you really giving up? And I think a lot of people agreed with your comment too, Stephen, on the ability to react and the badge of honor. I think that really resonated with a lot of people out there as well. No questions as of yet, but definitely we have a very engaged 6 sites across the country, and definitely listening. And so thank you for sharing so far.
Awesome. So let's change gears a little bit, gang. We've kind of disguised this one a little bit, this topic. under this theme of a truth that I really believe in that it takes longer to recover from cancer than it does to be treated for it. When I say disguised, I feel like it's disguised because I feel that is a truth, but the disguised part of it is really what that truth does is, because it is so unspoken in all areas, right? So in the cancer center, in the community, at home at the table, in the media, our expectations are set up in such a way that I feel they can do almost nothing but create stress, sometimes foreseen, sometimes unforeseen. Because it is a truth that although a massive amount, perhaps arguably the massive amount of resources is focused on that treatment phase, and we all agree we really want to get that one right if we can. But it's the next phase that for so many young adults in particular, the challenge comes, the awareness of the isolation and the devastation of the war that we have just fought. So many things come in the after-treatment phase, and that recovery, even for those lucky enough to have physical recovery quickly, the emotional and the mental and the spiritual recovery takes a lot longer. Can you tell me how that applies to your experience, Jamie?
Definitely. For me, it didn't hit me until I was done treatment, kind of what I went through. And I think actually I can think of an actual moment where it hit me, and I was in my doctor's office. Poor doctor. It hit me when he basically said I was on one drug, but there was no other treatment. I was done. So I think at that very moment it was kind of like, what now? Like, aren't you going to test me for anything? Like, how do you know that I'm done treatment? Are you kidding? Like,
can we get some certainty?
Yeah, can I see a scan that tells me that it's gone so I can be done? So, yeah, it all came down like all at once. So I was a blubbering mess basically in the doctor's office. And I think it comes from the fact that when you're diagnosed, for me, I didn't cry. I kind of was expecting something like that because of my, basically what was happening with me. But I was just like ready to go. Like, what's the game plan? Because I got this. Like, let's go. And so I did. You have your mind set on an end goal. So you go through the whole time thinking, okay, I just get through this next chemo, the next radiation, the next, and for me, like, I had things like after I was done chemo, I would celebrate. So I'd have a giant party and we'd all celebrate, and it'd be, I guess like you see on TV, rah rah, let's do this. It's exciting kind of thing. The reality is it's not exciting. It's shitty, really. Like, it sucks to go through it all. But for me, I needed like those moments to celebrate getting through. So when you're done, okay, you celebrate. Maybe you can have like one more party, and then people want you to get back to real life. Like, you are better. You don't have cancer now. Like, why aren't you working? What are you doing with your life now? You just escaped death, and now you don't have like fantastic plans for yourself. That was hard for me because I did have fantastic plans, but my body didn't allow me to do that. So I almost emotionally was definitely healthier going through treatment than when I was done.
Yep. It
all came pouring down on me. Like, I don't know, it's almost like you for sure don't trust your body anymore. There's no way you can trust it after it, betrayed you. You were doing it. I was doing everything right. I was eating while I was I wasn't sleeping because I was training, but exercising like a maniac, and I got sick. It didn't make sense to me, so I thought, at that point, I thought there was really nothing in my control that I could do to make sure I don't get sick. So why isn't the doctor doing something to make sure I'm not going to get sick? It just comes to that point where you want something else. And I'm not sure that medication is always the answer, but for me, at that time, it was. It was the only thing that gave me sense that I was doing something to fight. So emotionally, I didn't take care of myself at all. I just was fighting the fight, and then I was ready to get back. And I find a lot of your peers also kind of expect that when they ask you how you're doing, and, well, you're in remission now, so you're good. You did it. Like, it's time to celebrate kind of thing, but it didn't feel that way to me. Second time was worse, really. I'm not at the point where I can celebrate that I'm done yet, because I've got a lot of treatment ahead of me, but I don't know. I don't have the answers right now, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
If I was sitting here after my first diagnosis and I would have all different things to say. I'm not at a wonderful spot. Like, my body betrayed me again, so here I am.
Yeah. On the road to recovery, and it's a road. There's not a one place milestone in that. It's a continuous process. Peter, how does that idea of recovery taking longer than treatment itself play out in your life?
Well, I have to agree with you wholeheartedly on that observation about stemming from that comment from the web that my body betrayed me. You know, first time around, I like I said, I became so incredibly focused on the idea of, like, I'm going to beat this. And then when the treatment was done, and, you know, final CT scan, and they said, okay, well, there's dark spots in your abdomen. Either those are unaffected tumors, or they're lymph nodes that are burned out. But you have a choice: either wait and see, or we could go in there. But the surgery is threatening. There's a 50-50 chance you'll wake up. So at 27, how old was I? 27. I had to process that, and that level of it was uncertainty, but where do I go, this sense of direction, and I just walked in ready to go. And it was funny when you mentioned about the day before. You know, I remember the day before I went in. I went in on August 1st, 6 a.m., July 31st, I burned 4 hours at a video arcade. And I had the time of my life. And I just had a really, really good time, and then I walked in at 6 a.m. ready to go. To then be told after I woke up, which to my amazement I woke up, the oncologist said to me, it's good, they were burned out, it's over, you're done. And in my head, it's like this little thing going, no, I didn't get off that easy. And in hindsight, I think about, 6 cycles of chemo, got an orchiectomy, got this done to me. It's not really easy, but it's my fight. And to me, that was the normal thing to do, which is just take it head on and do what I got to do. Try to get a sense of life and direction after that. My compass was completely screwy. And then 3 years later, I pick up that the other one's going, and I recognize this familiar ache. And I agree so wholeheartedly. I feel like I can't trust my body. And the funny part is this past Wednesday, I went in for my CT results, and I was told that from the second diagnosis, I had to wait 10 years because of my type of cancer, because I was this random rare 3% chance to get testicular cancer with such a huge spread of time in between them. And at a 3% chance, I'm like, okay, well, it's no man's land. What do I do? And the big goal was always, when they say you can come back in a year, you know that you can use a word like remission. He told me that it's okay. And the first thing he said was, well, why don't you just come back in a year? And I had to talk him out of it. I did. I said, I want to come back in 6 months because I don't buy it. And this whole time I've lived every 6 months for those results. Have I done enough? Have I done enough? Have I done enough? Have I made the most of my time? I go through these moments where I have friends around me, people that I see that I care about, where our journeys don't always end up the same. What am I doing? And I went downstairs after that was done, and I'm not necessarily of a faith moment, but they have a spiritual, quiet space in the hospital. I went there and I sat and I just couldn't stop crying. And it wasn't a sense of joy, and this is just a moment of clarity that hit me yesterday in the gym, was cancer is the longest relationship I've had. And it's leaving. What do I do? This has been a part of my identity. And this now means, am I left with just me, or is it just a part of me? And I don't know. I mean, in a year from now, like what you just said, my answers might be completely different.
And I think that just speaks to the evolution of what we go through, and I think that's really healthy and normal, and sometimes really challenging, that your perspective on the same exact issue, as solid as you might feel about that today, it can change in a day or in a year quite easily. I know a lot of people talk about the security of the hospital, right? Like when you're having chemo or you're going in like you're in a routine, and often most of us were on a treatment path that's sometimes very defined or at least fairly defined between 6 or 8 cycles or whatever it's going to be. And then when that ends, that's that transition, and you kind of move to that recovery phase. Lindsay, do you remember making that transition out of active treatment and then into?
I think I still am.
Yeah.
I would, maybe not these past couple months, but certainly for probably 6 months after I actually stopped treatment, I wanted to be back on chemo. That sounds crazy, I'm sure, to most people, but I was like, well, I know what chemo brings. I know I'm going to feel crappy for a week, but then I can do things for these 3 weeks of a month. It was security. I knew exactly what a month would bring. Steve and I, my husband and I feel like cancer is our child. We've only been in a relationship where I've had cancer. We don't know any different, and the further I move out of treatment, it's scarier because we're kind of losing that security in a sense.
That's right.
It was easier for me to be on chemo than it is for me to be off it at the moment. There's so much emotional issues that I'm dealing with now that we never faced when I was on treatment, because on treatment the issues were physical ones, which were much easier to deal with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when we make that transition out, and Jamie, you touched on this a little bit, is that I want to be aware of the time, but this is such an important piece, is the idea that recovery takes longer than treatment, and then our understanding or not understanding of that, I feel, creates some real stress in our life, and that can extend out to our family's understanding of that, or our friends, or our employers, or our whatever. That's part of that challenge. But can we look into that time and think about expectations, and are there key things that you guys had to deal with on the expectation side, whether it was your own or those of somebody else, and how did you deal with that? If we're talking to our people here, our network tonight, and saying, you know what, because we're all dealing with that, the expectations of self, and reconciling others' expectations as well. How did you guys do it? What's the insight that you would share?
I had my own expectations for sure, and I still haven't reached them, to be quite honest. My expectations were that I would just get back to who I was, and I think that's the biggest thing with dealing with cancer, is that you will no longer be who you were before you went into this. It'll change you, regardless of what you want it to do. I mean, that happens with everybody on a daily basis, but cancer for sure will leave you a different person than you were going into it. So, expectations are kind of funny, because you might not have expectations of me, but I think you do.
Mm.
And so that's a big thing. Like, at my job particularly, there was a person in the office as well that was going through different treatments, sort of thing, but she showed up every day for work, and I don't know what anyone was thinking, but I almost felt like resentment or something, because I'm like, how can she show up and I can't? Like, what is wrong with me that I can't show up to work and do the job that she's doing? I mean, for her it was obviously a coping thing. She needed work to keep her mind off of things, and that's what she explained, but I expected myself to be able to do everything she could do, and it didn't turn out that way. It's just so hard.
How did you reconcile that? How did you reconcile the difference? Because it's challenging, and I think it's natural. What you just touched on is for us to look around and see others. Often we'll do it based on age or hometown, or sometimes the same diagnosis or same treatment, and like, well, he's got leukemia like I do, and he never gets infection after chemo, and I always do. That comparison is natural, and we do it, but oftentimes it leads us to a place where it puts us in a place where we should be performing a little better than we are, or at least that's what we think.
I don't know, but I still do it. To be quite honest, I still expect more of myself than maybe I'm capable of doing. But my big thing is trying not to compare. Everyone's journey is different, and so you really can't compare your treatment, your side effects, all that with another person's. It's just not possible. But for me, I always feel like I'm letting myself or other people down because I'm not doing the things that I expect I should be able to do. I was out of chemo and radiation and surgeries and all that at, I don't know, a year, 2 years. I should have been back to work. I should have been able to do everything I could have before, but I couldn't. And so for me, it was really frustrating. I don't know. I'm still dealing with it. Do you have a solution?
I have this magic potion. It's the new fundraiser for Yak. I wish. I know we've got some health professional buddies of ours in the audience that spend their whole day, every day, professionally working on that issue or issues very connected to it. And like everything with cancer, it's customized, right? It's not what works for you is going to work for me always. It's a very customized situation and a huge challenge without question. Jerry, I'm wanting to move on to reintroductorization, but I just want to check in with you before I do that.
Yeah, well, first of all, you guys are getting a lot of fan base, let's say, from your brave stories here. A lot of agreements, and again, it's more comments to your stories as well rather than questions at this point. But some of the comments was, to your point, Jamie, talking about people saying that you look normal makes people have an unfair expectations of, what you should or shouldn't be doing, and people saying things like, why are you're already better, why aren't you getting back to things already? And surgery and chemo, the comment was surgery and chemo was easy, quote unquote, compared to the after treatment. So a lot of people really agreeing with your stories there. So continue. And certainly we welcome comments from the audience as well. We do have 2 roving mics, so if you do have something you want to share other than questions for the question answer period, we definitely don't want to disclude you as well. Okay?
Awesome. So we'll move to the third theme tonight is reintroductorization. I'm not sure it's made it into the dictionary yet.
I was able to say it. I practiced it a lot.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, well, I really rehearsed that particular word.
It's been in Yak's dictionary since the first retreat ever in 2005, when one of our best buddies, Travis Gobet, was in a small group trying to come up with a way to describe what happens when you're diagnosed with cancer. And Travis was describing this path that we were on, and then you're diagnosed with cancer, and you are disintrajectorized off onto another path. And, of course, the opposite of disintrajectorization is the attempt to reconnect with that same path or, just find your new path afterwards. So thus has been our way of phrasing it. Reintrajectorization is that idea that, we're on the other side. We're in recovery, whatever that means. For some, it means they're on treatment for a long time or for the rest of their life. For some, it means that they've just moved beyond it, but they're still trying to find their way back to normal, whatever normal means. So that's the background on reintroductorization, and I want to talk about it a little bit because we're all still in pursuit of it. At least that would be my suggestion. Is that's this process that we're in. I'd love to know what surprised you about it. So if I said, Peter, as you think about you're back on track, and if you're in this 10-year phase and you're going to hit that, medically speaking, post-cancer phase, what's happening in that phase when you're reintroductorizing, and what surprised you about going into that phase?
I remember what I can quote is when I got into blogging, and it's not a shameless self-pro, it was one of those moments of clarity, something just popped in my head, and it was, I can't pinpoint the moment when my greatest enemy became my greatest teacher. And that's how I feel about it now. My fear is, I think why I cried about it, I sat down, now I've been able to think about it, is I'm terrified of losing what I've learned. I mean, I've had this invisible thing theoretically taken out of me more than once that's started in me. It's a part of me. It will never, I can't forget it. And what I learned is the idea of, I find when I talk with a lot of other guys for their type of cancer treatments, be it male-specific, gender, or just non-specific, there's a certain accompaniment of issues that come along with that, where as guys we're raised to express two emotions. We can either be happy or we can be angry. You're not allowed to be weak, vulnerable, crying, none of those things, because they are not masculine reactions. But then to be honest is to say, would you hold back a laugh? No. So why do you hold back a cry? It's like red resenting blue. They're equal and valid. So I found in that is to be as truthful as possible in my moment when I deal and I meet with people. And when I just react, whatever's going to happen in my moment. And I think back of this past Wednesday when my oncologist told me what he said. And of course, I mean, you get to know me, it's always a constant barrage of coping strategy humor. So I'll just crack out dark jokes and suddenly you're like, oh, I can't believe he said that. And I'd rather go for a giggle. But in the truth is that people have moments where there might be more negative emotion. You're encouraged not to wallow in it. And then in positive emotion, you know you can't make it last longer than it really will. All you can do is enjoy the ride it through, the next moment comes. And if that happened, universe forbid, that's your last moment, the one just prior was honest. And you can't ask for a more honorable existence. And I can say I think that's what it taught me. I mean, the type of chemo that I did, the sticks in my brain when I was getting my 6 cycles done, the nurse said to me, of all the things I can remember, it's, the kind of chemo we're giving you, you're probably going to get a different kind of cancer 20 years from now, but we'll have a way to treat it. So in my head, the Greek metaphor, I'm Damocles, and there's this sword just hanging over me. Don't know what, don't know when. So I'm not sure if I really buy that 10 years is going to mean something, but I can hope. So I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jamie, if you look at reintroductorization and kind of getting on track, you were trying to get back on track and then had an amazing life experience, a couple, JP and Lincoln, and then, had a recurrence that puts a unique lens on getting back on track for you. What do you think about getting back on track now?
My track is different. It's a different place now. I have different priorities and.
What are those priorities? How is it different? Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, the first few years after treatment, I was still getting back to work. I had it all planned out. I was gonna, move away and start over, and I was hoping that nobody would know what I went through, so they didn't treat me any differently. And I was one of the guys I could do anything they could do, kind of thing. It's different now. Like I've got a baby I have to think about. The RCMP has been supportive to me in a lot of ways, and so for me, for a lot of years, my big thing was just getting back to work. They're still paying me. I can't be, riding the system here. I need to get back, and that was my number one goal. Somewhere along the way, I decided I needed to have a family, and I had kind of one chance to do it. So as much as it kind of went against me getting back to work, it was the best thing I could have possibly done. At the same time, I questioned myself after the second diagnosis, was I being selfish? What if I'm not around to raise him? And I selfishly went through all of this to bring him here, and then I'm just going to leave, I mean, that's not in my plan to do, but who the heck knows what's going to happen, right? Yeah. So my plan prior to having him was get back to work and, get back to where I was headed in the beginning. So this time it's to stick around to raise him and, be a good family member and a good friend to everybody. And so luckily I was speaking with someone with the RCMP, and they said, why are you worrying so much about getting back to work? your number one priority should be your health. And so why are you spending your mental energy on getting back to work when we will be there for you, you know, when you're ready to come back? And for me, that was like a huge relief. There's obviously individuals that judge me and believe that I should be back because my hair grew back, and you know, my hair's back, so I'm obviously, you know, ready to go. So to have that kind of weight lifted, saying work on yourself before you get back to us, that's been huge for me. So I don't think about it as much as I used to, because my expectations for myself were to get back and earn my paycheck, you know. So
my mom used to tell me that if I used all my energy for living, I'd have none left for healing. And healing is a concept that's really, hopefully, but not always connected to remission, but certainly not always or often talked about in the Cancer Center. Don't usually have a lot of conversations with your docs or your nurses about healing. Hey, buddy. That's Lincoln in the back for those of you connecting in remotely, if you couldn't hear that. We're talking about you. He knows it. Yeah, so, and I think that it's natural for there to be a very real shift in probably every single parent's life the day they become a parent, right? It's almost at that point to shift from, you know, focused on your goals and dreams to your child's goals and dreams and being here. So I know all parents are relating to exactly what you're talking about right now. All those listening and connected in. How are we doing, Jerry?
A lot of talking about getting back on track. One of the comments said that the more times that cancer repeats itself, the harder it is to get back on track. And this particular person posted it's their third time, and that their confidence wasn't the same as 5.5 years ago when they first got diagnosed. Some of the other comments came back in terms of ways to get back on track, and they talked about the retreats that YAC has. They talk about strength of spouses and partners, and it refers to how important it is to have your spouse with you at all times, and that really is the rock of everything. Humor was another one, and I had to quote this one. It says, "Never underestimate the power of a pure belly, eye-tearing laugh." And I think that's very, very true. Another comment came in saying sometimes not finding the path back, but embracing the new road forward, which I think, Jamie, is sort of what you're talking about as well. It's a new track for you.
Yeah, and just for the record, at retreat, there is the occasional tear, but in my experience, they're often outweighed 5 or 10 to 1 with laugh. The tears are there, and I think there's a time and a place that's really important to acknowledge that. But the humor comes in on a regular basis. The topics are varied, I think we would agree. Not always the same topics that you talk about with your buddy when you're hanging out on a Friday night. Anything come to mind for any of you guys that might be different?
That's going.
I'm just wondering.
Are we talking about poop?
Oh, I thought it was going somewhere else, actually.
I think for the purposes of the audience, Jamie, we'd probably prefer bowel movement.
We all poop, Jeff.
We are. That's exactly right. And that's what we. Why is it so unique to talk about that? Hey. But it's a part of.
This was a eureka moment for me. My first retreat. I never talked about poop, and you don't talk about that with your friends and your family at dinner.
Why was it a big deal?
It was a big deal because I couldn't poop.
And then all of a sudden, you found YAC, and you could talk about your poop.
Other people can't poop too when you're on chemo. Yeah, it happens. So
it's kind of a funny contrast, given that you're talking about yakking, but you're actually talking about pooping. There, we're all together now.
there comes the humor.
Actually, when you said that, it reminded me of being at the 08 retreat. And if it's still going the same, which I imagine it is, it's a very organic process to decide what are the top subjects to talk about, and people break off into groups. And one of them was body image. And I remember walking into the rooms, like I wanted to go in there because I have prosthetics and been cut open, and my sense of masculinity was altered because it's gender-based cancer. And I walked in, and it was every breast cancer survivor in the room that were passing around a silicone implant. And so the conversation went done as soon as I walked in. I was like, oh, okay, well, and I felt like I had to justify myself for a second, so wedged in comfortably, very similar to this right now, and had to find a way to justify it. And before I just let the moment take over, and I said, oh, it's just silicone implants. Like, can I hold it for a second? It's like, oh, well, not too sure. I just went for it, and I go, is this the speaking boob? Can I talk about what I want to go through?
It's the conch.
And then before I knew it, I just put it on my top of my head like a yarmulke and said, now it's my turn to talk. And I just went on. When they were done laughing, they said, okay. And it's, it made it okay as a guy to talk about, we have body issues too. It's not just trying to mimic what's on the front of some exercise and fitness magazine. It's, no, like, I got a little effed up by this stuff, and I want to know if I can talk to you about it. And next thing you know, I've got this whole room full of sisters as an oldest brother of 3 boys. It was a cool thing.
Yeah. Now, I remember that retreat, and there were a bunch of guys at that retreat who had the courage, and I think it really takes courage. You touched on it earlier. It's, I think this is a big societal thing. Yak's not going to be able to solve this one, but as a guy, we're often given the space, the permission even, to express how we're really feeling. So I think it takes an extra amount of courage for a guy to come out and connect with Yak. But I feel like most things in life, if you take that extra risk, there is an extra reward there for that. And I know we had a pretty powerful retreat. They're all powerful and unique in their own way, but I know that one was as well. We'll move on to the final point, and talking about the retreat is a perfect segue, unintended as it was. I'm not sure how we're going to work poo into this one, but
I can always
but
work poo into
I'm
anything.
free. I'm open to you guys figuring it out. Really, we're going to talk about community, and I feel, I don't know how to describe it. Like when we introduce people to Yak, I'm always trying to explain the power of what happens at a retreat or a conference when a young adult comes in, nervous, shy, anxious, and never having talked with another young adult before, which is often the case. And then they get into this circle of other people who just totally get what they're going through. And the only way I can boil it down so far is to just, I guess it's just that there's this basic human need to connect. And for the most part, a lot of us, or probably most of us, don't have a whole lot of trouble fulfilling that need as we grow up and move into transition of the young adult years and career and beyond. Most of us find those avenues to connect, whether it's in school or social activities or work or whatever it is. And it is another part of the reality for young adults is that becomes very difficult to fulfill, that desire to connect with someone who understands. That's very difficult to fulfill once you're diagnosed as a young adult. The vast majority of us will be diagnosed and not have any friends who have had cancer. We'll go to the cancer clinic and we'll be surrounded by our parents' friends and our grandparents' friends. We won't find another young adult. If we do, it's in passing or by fluke. So we get into this place of isolation, which is something that I know you guys know. Can you talk a little bit about, your cancer experience before connecting with community in that isolated state, Lindsay?
I thought I was fine.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was isolated until I felt what not being isolated was like. The retreat this summer was life-changing and life-saving for me. I didn't want to go. I didn't know what it could do for me. I was severely depressed, and I was fine with being severely depressed. I got into the circle on the first night of the retreat and heard everyone share their stories of diagnosis and a little bit about themselves, and it was like, holy crap, there's other people, and I'm allowed to be depressed. I'm allowed to feel as shitty as I feel. And they just got it. That's, I know, Yak's thing, and it's so true. That night in Nova Scotia, it saved my life. I would have killed myself if I had walked out of that room, and Steve thankfully made me stay, and Corinne gave me a book that night, and I read it and stayed for the rest of the retreat. And since then I have never looked back and never thought about going back to that suicidal place. I know that there are people across the country that I can turn to on those days that I still feel crappy, and I absolutely still have those days, but there's other people out there going through similar things, and it's pretty spectacular to realize that.
Yeah, that's really powerful to share. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for helping me do that,
Yeah.
helping me connect.
So Lindsay, once you connected, the experience at the retreat is one thing. It's powerful. It's 4 days. It's like this little cocoon of compassion and understanding. How did you transition out of that?
Staying in touch with people. Facebook's been great for that.
Yeah, all the complaining we do about Facebook.
Yeah,
There's
some good.
Give it a massive thumbs up for that.
It's easy just to post a quick status and have even people just like a status. Reminds me, oh yeah, you know what? So-and-so's thinking of me today, or it's really easy to keep in touch. Knowing that I can just text, a friend in Calgary, a friend in Nova Scotia, and just stay in touch easily.
Yeah.
We still, in our office at home, have up everything from the retreat. And if I'm having a shitty day, just glancing over at that piece of cloth that I wrote down everything I want to bring home, and no, I vowed to myself that I would not go back to that deep, dark place that I was at, and this little piece of cloth does that for me on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. Peter, how did you, we know how Jamie came to Yak, through the badgering of our nurse. But, and Lindsay said, if I could paraphrase, it's almost like you don't know what you don't know. So you can feel, isolated and depressed and even severely, but if you've never had the experience that is that authentic connection with someone else who gets it, you don't know what you're missing.
That is, yeah.
You don't know that you're missing that. What was the instigator to leading you to reach out and look for connection, and how did that work?
Well, I found that I was very analytical, and I tend to be research-based. So as much as now in hindsight I know that there is a pro and a con of getting on the interweb and deciding to educate yourself, because we know that that's very well policed. And clearly they filter everything. When you're done freaking out, you don't need chemo, you pulled your own hair. Been there, done that. I actively started looking for just anything that was, I think I just punched in on Google, testicular cancer Toronto, and sort of kind of looked through Facebook, and someone gave me an ad about a survivor who attended Yak. Daniel Schneiderman was doing a one-man play about his left nut. And I was like, oh. So I went, and in my mind I thought to myself, this is going to become my little mission, just to go and talk to somebody who's been through this. Because before diagnosis, the only thing I really knew about cancer was what the media taught me. It's something where it's old people, or it's a telethon for some 10-year-old in a country or a state I've never heard of, and I'm just supposed to feel terrible for them. And I'm like, well, I have no personal connection. I see what you put in front of me, and that makes me feel bad because you've done it. I didn't organically have it happen. And I just wanted to I think I just wanted a sounding board, and if I had a dime for every time whenever I told somebody, I've got testicular cancer, have you read Lance Armstrong's book? It's like, it leveled the table off for a while. And I always said to myself, I would rather meet the guy in person and just say, how'd you handle it? And that's really just, that was my attitude. It moved on to meeting a comedian who decided to re-injectorize himself by taking this path. And I resonated with that, and then he had told me about yak. It sparked my curiosity, and that's what prompted me to go to my first retreat. And I was scared poopless. Huh? I worked it in. Build up. Not constipation, but build up. And I can't imagine my life not having actively looked for and currently being able to just have those incredible jewel moments of meeting people like you, and I'm sure a bunch of you, and later on I'll meet you, and hearing it. Every story is so unique. It's such a journey, and I don't ever take that for granted. Inside my gut, I can't do that. Maybe it's because the doctors are playing with it, but I just can't. You're used to my jokes by now. Come on.
She's fuel.
They are not.
How are they supposed to get to know me? And it's, I can't imagine my life. I can't remember my life not looking for people now. I can't. It's something inherent. If there's one thing that I took from, and I've said this before at local life meetings as well as to other new survivors when they ask me, what are the retreats like, what are the conferences like? You put a bunch of people who have never met each other for the first time in a room where your common denominator is the most painful experience of your life. It is the most no bullshit zone you will ever find. And that honesty stems power. And that kind of power never leaves.
Yeah. Do you think that is the or part of the key to the connection that we feel, is that we've started these new friendships in such a no bullshit zone that everything that you do beyond that is so truly authentic that it just enhances the power and the meaningfulness and the significance in our lives. Is that a fair way to articulate it, Jamie? How do you?
As much as you want to connect with the people that were in your life prior to cancer, you'll never connect with them the way that you'll connect with a survivor. Because you can explain to them the things you've gone through, but they'll never really get it, Like, they can have empathy and sympathy and those things, and it's not their fault that they don't get it, but they just don't. For me, I didn't realize, I thought I had it handled, I was tough, right? And so I thought I didn't need to talk to anybody, and so that's kind of, I went to this retreat kind of just to please my nurse, really. That's the only reason. I said no probably 20 times. Actually, I'm a people pleaser. So what I did was every time she'd ask me, have you checked it out? And I'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do that soon. Yeah. Just kind of like string her along until I only have 6 months of chemo. Like, I got this.
You can avoid her for 6 months?
Yeah, for 6 months I can avoid this. But she just kept asking, and so finally I took the pamphlet. I signed up, and I got on a plane, and I showed up in Montreal, and it was scary. It was scary because I hadn't even dealt with anything. I was still on chemo. I hadn't dealt with all these emotions yet, and I just thought, well, I'm getting a free trip out of it, I guess. So, if nothing else, I get to see Montreal.
That's right.
So it was such an amazing experience to be able to. And like Lindsay said, I didn't know that I needed it at all. Like, I thought I got this covered. I got good family, good friends. Like, they'll understand. They get it. But honestly, until that poop conversation, which for me is like a moment of clarity, yep. I never really got it that I needed that connection with other survivors to get through my own journey. Even if it's just, you feel crappy one day and you want to know, has anyone else experienced this kind of thing? Just fire it off, email, Facebook, whatever. There's people all over Canada that I've met now that I can field these questions to. They know the answers. They've been there, and just to be able to feel like you're not alone is a huge thing.
Yeah, that's right. It sure is. And you're not anymore. So for anyone who's on the fence about coming to a Yak event, you're getting some powerful testimony. That's right. Careful, the cop is coming for you. We're going to hunt you down and we're going to rail you in. That's right. Jerry, how are you doing over there, man?
A lot of comment on the retreat and how it's helped people a lot in terms of taking the isolation away, connecting with people, and truly that Yak has your back, which really is demonstrated in the retreats. Also comments coming in on the power of the authenticity and the raw honesty that you all are sharing right now, that it's making a huge impact on Facebook and across the country. So I continue to echo all of their comments back to you.
Yeah.
And I think we have some questions coming in too. So
Super. Okay. Because I was going to ask you guys, if you were to go back to the day you were diagnosed, now, if you could hop in that DeLorean that Marty McFly had and fire yourself back to that day, and you could give yourself one piece of advice, what would you say to yourself on the day you were diagnosed, Lindsay?
Slow down.
Slow down?
Mm-hmm. Slow down to appreciate every moment, every day. Life isn't a to-do list. And just appreciate it. Appreciate even the days on chemo. Appreciate feeling crappy in the mornings. Just appreciate everything.
And is that advice you've taken now? Is that how you've learned that piece? Yeah, well, hey,
there's a
process.
You know, some days are good with that. Some days are not so good with that. But
and
I'm trying to.
How did you come to that conclusion that's a key piece of advice?
After my counselor, naturopath, acupuncturist, after everyone has told me that week after week after week after week, I thought maybe they're on to something.
So it was repetition.
Yep.
Coercion, perhaps.
Yep. Yep.
I like it. How about you, man?
If I got back in that DeLorean and went back to that day, first I would question if I get cancer from that car, because really, it's full of plutonium. Bad idea. Flux capacitor, hashtag. I think I would have told me point blank, you have absolutely no clue how strong you are. You don't even realize what you can handle. And stop worrying about everybody else's feelings. It's very possible he'd slap me. A couple times. More soap opera style, but yeah, just to get the point across. And just to put on a bit of a show, yeah.
Hey, we're getting some fireworks here in the background somewhere. It's a little bit of
they approve
celebration for the advice that we're doling out here. I love it.
I think it's a matter of hindsight is always 20/20.
Yeah.
And it can be a series of would-haves, could-haves, should-haves, but it like for me personally, it always brings me back to that same ideology that I've found that works for me best, is to do my best in each moment, to be that authentic. So I can look back on it and say, well, you know what, I did my best. It might not be as good as tomorrow, probably not as, I did worse the day before, but it was always my best. And who's going to judge me? Nobody. Because nobody's me.
Super. Yeah. Thanks, man. Jamie?
Well, my words of wisdom. I think maybe enjoy the ride. It's not always going to be obviously what you expect, but I'm kind of like a silver lining kind of person, and so for me, I just want to look at the positive. And by the way, that can get really annoying when you're going through treatment, when people say that to you constantly. Just be positive. You got this. It's kind of hard to remain positive at all times, but you know it can get you through. Enjoy the ride, but expect that it's taking you somewhere that maybe you didn't want to go. But you'll learn something from yourself. So just allow things to happen the way that they're happening. You know, you got to release control, I guess, at some point. I'm a cop, so I think at all times I want to have control, but it doesn't always work that way. So I don't know. Enjoy the ride and let it take you where it's going to take you, and you'll come out a different person, but hopefully a better person.
And was there a moment when that kind of came to you, like a aha, or was that a process that led you to?
Oh, it's a process for sure. Oh yeah, it's a process. I'm not going to say every day I enjoy the ride, you know.
Yeah.
Every day I'm not saying like, oh, thank you, I'm still here for this crap that I'm going through, because that's what it is some days.
Yeah.
But you know, the next day could get better, and then yeah, I'm going to enjoy. I really do enjoy things a lot more than I shouldn't say enjoy. I appreciate them more than I did before I was sick. Mm-hmm. Simple, stupid things, you know, like that you take for granted. But I do. And every day with my baby, it's just like I'm so happy to see him and so excited. He's not always a happy guy, you know. Like I can say he gets grumpy, but I enjoy it. Like I get to be there and, you know, be his support when he's, you know, having a rough day or whatever. It's cool for me. And prior to being sick, having a baby like that might have stressed me out. Like he's not that perfect baby that everyone, you know, wants to, you know. He is a pretty perfect baby, by the way.
Of course.
But
he's allowed to have a bad day. Or
yeah, it's all right. I guess
okay.
I have them too. So
that's all right.
I don't know if it's a process. I guess just try to enjoy your, you know.
Yep.
Because I guess nobody knows, you know, when their day will come. But cancer definitely sticks in your face. Like, hey, this could be the last time you hear your baby cry. So instead of bitching about it, just enjoy it. Here it is. So I don't know. I try to do that.
It's super cliche, but I really think it's super true. You know, when you've had a diagnosis of cancer, it changes the lens that you view the world with, and we still get frustrated. Obviously, we still have bad days. All of those things are there, but I think it gives you the opportunity to enjoy the little things, the simple things, in a different way. And hopefully, most of us or all of us are able to take that, because I think it's a life-changing perspective. It's a life-changing piece. Like you said, you're not going to be the same person after a diagnosis of cancer. I do think it's largely within our control what kind of person we're going to be, but it's really based on our reaction. It's not. We don't get to pick our path 100%. There's more got to react to what's provided to us. Mm-hmm. Awesome. How are we doing, man?
I think, well, first of all, I want to say that the firecrackers is a very good sign. I don't know if you're watching remotely and you heard firecrackers. First of all, it's not a war that started outside in Toronto. We don't want any rumors like that going on CNN. But it's interesting. For Chinese New Year, I don't know if you know, but they have the dragon dance where they do firecrackers as part of the dragon dance. And the symbolism of the firecracker is that it actually wards off all bad omen and bad evil coming in for the year. So I take that as a great sign, actually.
Nice.
For
So
this
you're all
group.
cured.
That's right. We're good to go.
I second that. You're the dragon when I was born.
So we do have questions, and I canvassed our live audience here in Toronto as well. If you do have questions, you can either raise your hand and the microphone will come to you, or if you want rather just write them down on the cue card. Volunteers will collect it and bring it up to me as well. Do you want me to start with a couple of questions I have here?
Yeah, I love it.
Okay. The question that came in was for the panel. How do you deal with survivorship guilt? And by that, they mean the guilt that what we have done to our loved ones. How do you deal with that?
So everybody's head flew back on that one because, you know, everybody is connected, and part of that is enhanced, for lack of a better word, by the fact that you've connected with Yak and you've got a big survivor network now, and that means that some survivors don't make it. And we've had a particularly tough couple months, really, where we've had several survivors that have passed away, and that is a challenging experience for us to see. So you guys, anybody want to jump on that one?
I think the first time after with Yak, the first Yak retreater that I found out about was my roommate from '08. And I didn't really know what the phrase survivor's guilt was, but I was trying to find the words, and it's, I've met these incredible, epic people in my life who I can connect with like no other. This is my new family of brothers and sisters. why them, not me? And I don't know. But sometimes I catch myself and I try to play a quick role reversal, and I think about the person that I know and I remember and how we connected in the last moments that we might have spent with one another.
Yeah.
And what would you do? Okay, I remember you. I think about you. I love you. I remember how you made me smile and all the copious dumb shit moments we had. And I live. And I carry them with me. I'll admit I'm kind of pro ink and I tend to go tattoo oriented, and for me that's my coping strategy. I'm going to need more of them soon. On my birthday for the past 7 years now, I sit in the exact same spot here in Toronto in front of Princess Margaret Hospital as soon as it kicks over to midnight. And I bring a balloon and I write down all the names of my friends who have passed away that I knew. And I just say hi. That's my way. Everybody can do their own. But there is no wrong way. And guilt, I mean, I don't want to make it sound jovial, but I ain't got time for that. Because I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here. So how exactly am I honoring my friends who aren't here anymore by driving myself batty about, the whys and the wheres? I have no idea. Like, every guy in my family smokes. I didn't, and I got cancer. What's that about? And that was what media taught me. So it's not that I don't feel guilty. I don't confuse guilt with mourning.
Yeah. And you honor them. That's a really powerful, important thing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
This
Jamie?
one's huge for me, huge,
Yeah.
and it's been like ever evolving too. So my first good friend that I met at 2008 retreat, we became really good friends. We had similar breast cancers, and we traveled together to other events. This is a crazy thing, but I was in Texas with. There's me and 3 other survivors that had met through YAC, but we had all traveled together to this women's breast cancer event anyways. And there was like a memory board, and so we weren't from the States, so we didn't know anybody on there, but we all went over there and we read it and we looked, and it was like a silent moment where we're like realizing we could be up there one day. And so the 4 of us made a pact that if that happened, we would do that for each other. We would like make sure nobody forgot about us, kind of thing. And about a year after a year after all of this had happened, they were all gone, and it was just me. I have a hard time with it because I feel the need that I'm the one that made the pact that I was gonna keep them alive, and there's so much pressure on me to do that. Just recently, I guess I've decided I can't take it all on because we don't know out of the 4 of us which one would make it, and I did. So it's hard for me to know why, and for sure I questioned it, like why me and not anyone else. It's a big thing, like it's huge, and you just feel guilty. That's the only way to put it. You just feel like, why couldn't they? They were awesome people, So much so that I actually kind of at one point said I can't keep coming to these events because it's too hard to keep losing these awesome people that I'm meeting. So it was easier to kind of walk away and not meet any more people that were going to die. But I always have to come back because it's worth it. You meet some amazing people, you get to be who you are, just really honestly, and it doesn't make it easier. Like, it's sad to say, but you get, it's just kind of something that happens. You get used to losing people, and it'll never be okay and acceptable, but you learn how to deal with it, I guess. I think it'll always be present. You'll never know why you and not them, because they wanted to live just as much as you did, but I don't know. It's a big thing.
It is a big thing. Lindsay, how does that relate to you?
This morning was the funeral for, I'd say, my closest yak friend. So I don't just start crying. I'm just going to echo what Peter said. It's about honoring them, keeping them alive in your hearts and in any other ways that you feel is right. I'm just going to leave it there for now.
Awesome. Thank you for that. How are we doing?
Interesting segue, because the next question was someone's has a number of friends from retreats who have recently passed away, and every day they are touched with sadness running through my head. How can I even begin to deal with those thoughts?
I would just jump in on that one for a second, and within the honoring energy, Yak has really made it part of every program that we do to reserve a space for that. And we would certainly encourage everybody to find their way to do that on a personal basis. Within the presence of others at a retreat or a conference, or outside that, or by yourself. It's a really important space, and we do joke that we're like the mob. I'm not sure it's a joke, but we like to let you guys think it's a joke. But we talk about the fact that once you're in, you're never out, and that's the truth that we really try and authentically live. We're building a community of people. It is the greatest strength that we have. It definitely comes with challenge, but it is our commitment to all of you in our network that you will always be part of that network. You will be part of every conference and every retreat that we do. So although you may feel we view it as a shared responsibility to keep their memory alive, Jamie, and it's a core part of how we operate, and that's not going to change. It's the way we do things. I don't know if you guys want to jump in on that or not, but it's been a tough couple of weeks, couple of months really, and it's you're not the only one who questions why should I be here? I want to pull out, and some do, and some have pulled back and not come back, and it's a personal choice. You got to make the best call that you can for yourself. But we hope that everyone would just hopefully the pros outweigh the cons, and you get more fulfillment and joy and happiness and love and support from being in the community than out.
I think I honor them just by showing up, and I don't think I have like these miraculous things to say, but for some reason it affects other people that haven't been to that point in their journey yet. So I guess it's honoring them just to be there for other people if I am what they need at that moment, Yeah. So even though it's hard, for sure, it's hard to keep coming back and meeting amazing people that will pass. It happens. Doesn't make it easy, it just is what it is. It's going to happen. But you have to decide if it's worth it, and it will be worth it every single time.
I believe that too.
Mm-hmm.
It's a personal choice, but I really do.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully everyone else sees the value of that.
To touch on, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I found that in each experience relative, be it a matter of honoring or mourning or whatever element may touch from our respective cancer journey, there is no real roadmap or guidebook to say, bam, you got cancer, and this is how you get through it, that is tailored specifically to each one of us. But then somewhere along the line, when these types of things happen, as our journey continues, we honor those because we become the roadmaps. We give others a lay of the land. Mm-hmm. It may not be the exact road, but this is kind of what it looks like. And this is the way that it has happened for other people. Not saying it's going to be you. Don't know if it's going to be me. But, hey, do you want some company?
Yeah, man. I remember a long, long time ago, before I had my first transplant, it took me a month to decide if I was even going to have it. I remember the impact, I can still feel it, of seeing another patient who was a year or 3 years or 5 years out of a transplant. Mm-hmm. I didn't even have to talk to them. was just immediately seeing them was a message to me. To your point of you coming back and honoring them, it's a message to me. It's that you can get 1 year, you can get 3 years, you can get 5 years, you can get 10. So part of the coming back is for your own self, but sometimes coming back is showing other people that you can make it down this path. 1 year, 10 years, whatever it's going to be, and that's a part of the power again of the network. Is sometimes you come and you get a little bit. Sometimes you come and you give a little bit, or a lot. Jerry, we're running out of time. Do you got one or?
I have one more question, but does the audience? Yeah, the audience has a question here. Maybe we can take an audience question and then.
Yeah, that's what.
Hi. First, I just wanted to thank you for talking about survivor's guilt. I went to the same funeral. I know a few others did, and I'm struggling with that for the first time. But what I wanted to ask about was, I guess, mostly for Jamie and Peter, but and you touched on this a little already, but I wondered if you could talk about between your first cancer and going into remission, and then before the second the recurrence. Can you talk about how you dealt with fear of possible recurrence? Because that's something I very much still struggle with.
Thank you.
I think it's kind of an everyday thing. I don't know that it ever goes away. I think everyone that's been diagnosed, you're very aware of your body, and you know your body more than anyone else does. But after the first time you're diagnosed, everything that goes wrong with you has to be cancer, because that's what it was last time. So it's hard. I was from the time I was diagnosed with my first to my second, it was 5 years. I still wasn't trusting my body, and so I think it's just you have to come to a place. I don't want to give you advice because it could be different for you. For me, I had to just come to a place where I accepted the fact that it could happen again. But I didn't want to worry myself into it happening again. I didn't want to be the cause for it to happen. And I know for me, stress is a big thing. Stress makes me sick. So for me, I just had to know it could happen. But try not to fear it, I guess. I did it once. I could probably do it again. So I don't know. I don't know if it ever goes away, to be honest, because it hasn't for me.
I agree with what you're saying. It's I think we've touched on it in various ways in this conversation, that every survivor's journey is unique, and in the sense of a multiple diagnosis, it's kind of a blind side. Like you don't anticipate it. I mean, I can't speak for other people's experience, but I know that when I walked in, they thought I had like lobsters crawling out of my head when I said, no, I think I had cancer again, and sure enough I was right, and Mr. 3% chance, yet I can't win the lottery. But 50 mil. It's like what I had said earlier about the Damocles sword just hanging over your head. You're just not 100% sure because, as you said earlier, I don't trust my body. My body did this, and then I had to deal with it, and I don't know what the next round's going to bring. It's not like I can get testicular cancer a third time. So, I'd be calling Guinness. I'd be on the phone and saying, yeah, in the prosthetic. You're not going to believe this. Right? But it'll be a whammy. And in that is where the fear comes from, because I don't know how to deal with that. I know how to deal with testicular cancer inside and out. It's in terms of treatment, knowledge, getting educated, all that stuff is there. But if it's something else, it's going to be like the first time all over again, except I know or I have a semblance of what treatment might be like. But it could be completely different. So touching on what I had said earlier about the idea of being earnest and honest about your emotions in the moment, that's where you look to your rocks. That's where you look to your sounding boards, the people who are in your support network where you can air those fears out. And in that, you take the power out of it. And although you're emotionally invested, you can't help but be invested in those moments and those experiences because you're talking about yourself. But you know that you're not alone. And the objectivity does start to come, where you're able to look at it in a clinical fashion and say, okay, this is my choice, this is my option, what do I do next? And all you can do is your best. But don't be afraid to be honest about it. And if you're going to have a spaz out, go for it. If you're going to, cry your eyes out and that's what you need, if you want to go to the gym and hit the bag for half an hour because you're pissed at the universe for giving me a triple whammy, go for it. Because nobody knows how to get you through it better than you do.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. Do you have one or where?
I think we're out of time, but what I'd like to do is just maybe share a quote with you and then pass it back to you, Jeff, for closing. And this is a quote from Ian. It was a post which contains a quote. And he says, it sometimes snows as late as May, but summer always comes eventually. God bless Yak and all the wonderful friends I have made through the milestone Team Davidson has been given. Do I believe we will come out on top? Definitively, yes. Thank you for being on the panel and sharing, Jamie, Peter, and Lindsay. You rock. And I think tonight I thank the audience here and thank the audience from across Canada. I truly believe tonight we actually made Canada a little bit closer together. So thank you to all of you, and back to you, Jeff.
Well said, Jerry. Special thanks to Coach for that comment. We love you, Coach. I wanted to just leave you with a final message as we wrap up the first big cancer hookup. And tonight we discussed that truth, that it takes longer to recover from cancer than to be treated. But this is a truth, as we discussed, that's really largely unknown. And I believe that's because it's largely unspoken, especially and even by those who really know it to be true. And if you're really unaware of this truth, and the really challenging impact it can have on your life, or the life of a young adult that you love, then I would suggest that this unawareness is going to be a real major source of struggle for you. And that struggle is really going to be conceived and fed by a disconnect between your reality and your expectations. Your expectations of self are going to be in contrast with your reality, such that it's really going to provide you with a profound struggle. Particularly as you move out of the war and move out of treatment and into that next phase of life. In life, just like in cancer, that really expectations are often a major source of stress. And these expectations for recovery, like the bounce back or the return to normal, they're another part that really make this experience for young adults unique. And that's because our expectations are unique. Right? The expectation, the desire to beat down that path that we've got laid out for us, to start the career. Really what we're doing is we're laying the foundation for the rest of our life. And cancer certainly was not in the plans. And the expectations that we have at this stage add another layer of complication of that recovery. So I want to make a request, really, for everybody, panel included. And that is that you acknowledge the expectations of others, and you'll know who they are. But I want you to acknowledge them and then make the effort to leave them in the trash on the way out tonight. It's a unique challenge, the young adult years in general. And we have had a particularly different and incredibly challenging time because of our diagnosis with cancer. The last thing that any of us need distracting us from reintrojectorizing are the expectations of others. And while we are reviewing expectations, perhaps we'll carve out a little bit of time to review the expectations that we have of ourselves as well. And while we're doing that, I want you all to know that now you are in a network to do that review, full of people like Lindsay, Peter, and Jamie, who have wisdom, heart, and experience, and they're here and they want to help. So as you move forward, I want to emphasize for all of you that Yak's got your back. Thank you all so much for connecting and hooking up with us in the first big cancer hookup. Good night.